Whenever a new Zelda title hits store shelves, the fanbase is quick to consider it an instant hit, and with good reason. Each and every Zelda title pushes the boundaries of the series' norms, and when Breath of the Wild was released along with the Nintendo Switch in March 2017, it turned a lot of heads. Touting near-perfect scores from news outlets and fans alike, there's no denying that Breath of the Wild blew the minds of both longtime Zelda fans and the gaming world as a whole. What makes The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild unique?
Link.
What makes Breath of the Wild unique is how it captured all the best parts of nearly every Zelda title before it, and both evolves and adds to these features in such a way that it feels like near perfection of the Zelda formula. The beginning of the game is straightforward. Players find themselves awoken in a dark cave. Once equipped with the new Sheikah Slate, Link leaves the cave and thus the world opens up around the player. This was the biggest selling point that Nintendo was proud to promote during the hype of the game. Unlike its predecessors, Breath of the Wild opts for a Bethesda-style open-world game design. However, despite the similarities to Skyrim and Fallout, it is more used to harken back to the original Legend of Zelda for the NES. The Zelda series was receiving increased criticism of following a similar dialogue and exposition-heavy storytelling style, guiding the player very linearly when the series always touted its level of exploration. Thusly, the game keeps its storytelling to a minimum and lets the player figure it out for themselves. However, cutscenes and storytelling still exist, and if anything, they're perfectly placed for those who appreciate it. The early parts of the game take place on the Great Plateau, serving as a tutorial and just a taste of what the game has in store for players. Rather than visiting large dungeons, the game offers many smaller challenges within shrines. The tutorial shrines unlock the 4 and only abilities or items for players to use: Magnesis, which lets players move around metal objects; the Remote Bomb, which comes in 2 shapes and can be detonated when the player decides; Stasis, which stops time of an object; and Cryonis, which creates a pillar of ice from any body of water. There's also the camera function, but it plays more of a completion bonus role to the gameplay. These 5 runes are the only traditional tools that Link has, and despite getting all of them in the early parts of the game, their use is integral throughout the adventure, and their skills are used to their full potential. The bombs are simple enough: round bombs for rolling, square bombs for precise placement. Magnesis can be useful if players take the time to notice which objects are made of metal. Stasis also conserves kinetic energy in order to send things flying, and Cryonis can be used to scale waterfalls, and this is just a basic idea of the potential these weapons have. After completing the tutorial areas, the player is given the paraglider and sent off into the vast world of Hyrule. The paraglider helps when traveling long distances, but needless to say, long distances are the least of players' worries. The map of Hyrule is absolutely gigantic. With all the staple regions, the world not only feels alive, but fully ingrained in the Zelda universe. Places like Kakariko Village, the Lost Woods, Lake Hylia, Death Mountain, etc. are all here in their HD glory. The world itself is so large that players will find themselves setting many waymarkers in order to explore effectively. The Sheikah Towers can reveal regions on a player's map, but that is just one of the many things to find throughout the lands of Hyrule. First off, there are hundreds of shrines, which gives players a spirit orb for completing. 4 of these can be spent to increase max hearts or stamina. Even just finding these shrines is helpful because they can be used as fast travel points. There are also the 900 Korok seeds littered throughout the lands. The Korok seeds can be found anywhere that looks interesting or enticing, and between these, shrines, towers, and of course the story itself, players find themselves lost in the sheer amount of things to find. The strategy guide, in fact, is well over 300 pages, and even then it mostly just tries to condense the many collectibles as tightly as possible. For the first time in a very long time, a Zelda title feels like a fresh, enormous experience. But for those who prefer the more direct experience that the 3D titles have cemented, the options are still there. Throughout the game, players are given quests, which can be checked at a moment's notice on the pause screen. This gives players enough direction to be able to complete the main story or even side quests. The story follows Link after waking up from a 100-year slumber. Prior to these events, himself, Zelda, and the 4 great heroes of Hyrule were amidst a clash with Ganon. However, Ganon had the upper hand and had discreetly infected much of the Hyrulean weaponry to use it against them and defeat the heroes of Hyrule. Since then, his new form, known as Calamity Ganon, has spread its power across Hyrule, leading to many dastardly, evil, and powerful creatures across the land. And during the night, Ganon's Red Moon even resurrects all enemies that Link has defeated. It spells for a dark and gloomy story, but gives players all the more drive to reconnect with the 4 legendary heroes and, of course, save Princess Zelda. The main questline visits the many memorable locations across Hyrule with a few subplots. A big collectible is the Memories. Armed with the Sheikah Slate's camera function, Link can find 12 locations that give him memories of his time prior to his slumber. These cutscenes, now fully voice acted, definitely feel right at home with other 3D Zelda titles, fleshing out the characters and giving the story a lot more weight. The dungeons themselves are also well integrated into the story, but with some new twists. The 4 main dungeons are the legendary weapons of Hyrule that Ganon had turned against the heroes. They are towering pieces of ancient machinery, so big in fact that they can be seen from miles away, and their effects are felt as players approach. This makes the dungeons feel more involved with the story and the world of Hyrule itself, and even their designs feel fresh and dynamic. Rather than finding a dungeon item, when players find the map, they can use it to slightly control the dungeon, allowing for a unique twist on the puzzle mechanics. Plus, despite the more compact dungeons, they come fitted with many extra hidden treasures, and of course, great rewards for collecting them. Once the dungeon is complete, Link gets a new passive ability from the hero associated with that region, and the area in question is now in a safer place thanks to Link's bravery. It's reminiscent of the subplots of other 3D Zelda titles, but the way the dungeons are living and moving, it feels vastly different from its predecessors. Whether players finish the dungeons or not is completely up to them, but no matter how players choose to complete the game, it comes with many tough challenges. In fact, some of the toughest in the series. Simply put, from the Great Plateau onwards, players are only driven by their own curiosity. Even when being directed towards the 4 main areas, there's no specific order. For that matter, one of the biggest selling points of the game was Nintendo announcing that Breath of the Wild could be beaten very quickly, and in fact, the speedrun for the game is already under an hour. Coming back to Zelda 1, Nintendo planned on giving players the option to do a low % run. Although this is extremely difficult, it's amazing how Nintendo factored this into its gameplay design. But whether players aim to play the game quickly for an extreme challenge, the game poses very sizable threats for all players with the introduction of the Guardian enemies, as well as many other formidable foes. Even well into the game, facing Guardians are a stressful encounter, and players need to be prepared or else hope that they have a bit of luck on their side. The combat of Breath of the Wild finally expands on what the 3D game started. The signature L targeting is the core of the gameplay, but now Link can only use his 4 runes, his trusty sword, and a bow and arrow. Some enemies like the bokoblins are just as easy as they've ever been, but the moblins pose a tough threat, plus the aforementioned Guardians, both of which can take out Link very quickly if players are careless. But what's evolved is the many ways to handle these enemies. Enemies are often grouped in camps, so players can take the time to come in with a game plan. Maybe they run in with their horse to make sweeping attacks, maybe they find a vantage point and rain down arrows, or they can even look into environmental options or using their runes. Tougher enemies even have weaknesses that can be exploited, such as the eyes and legs of Guardians. With all these options in mind, plus the slowdown when Link dodges perfectly or tries to fire an arrow from the air, it feels like an action movie that players can have full control over. There's so much to consider that players will need to be equipped for any situation, so on top of the evolved combat comes the critical feature of inventory management. Weapons need to be picked up from enemies or purchased in town, and considering that weapons break and enemies are so formidable, players will regularly have to restock on weapons and arrows. Items such as healing potions and elixirs need to be crafted by collecting food and using a simple cooking function, and even the clothing plays a factor, increasing defense or hindering speed. Plus, throughout the game, the weather can play a factor and players will need to dress accordingly. This can be simply wearing thicker clothing in cold temperatures, or even making sure not to use metal equipment during a lightning storm. Even collecting and riding a horse comes with a lot more finesse and practice, but ultimately helps players appreciate their existence, especially with the huge map. The sheer amount of things to collect and store makes inventory management a big part of playing the game, which is the benefit to collecting Korok seeds to expand inventory space. All of this is carefully crafted into the gameplay. The only thing holding players back from traversing this expansive world is their curiosity and stamina meter. Increasing the stamina gauge lets Link climb for longer, glide longer distances, and heck, it plays a role in the combat. Every player's experience is different because they can choose how much time to spend grinding and exploring. The benefits to exploration are heavily proven throughout the adventure, and it all combines everything players love about the Zelda series. Open world with little guidance gameplay that harkens back to the NES, combat and control similar to the 3D titles, quest lines and management similar to Majora's Mask, a big expansive world with no loading screen similar to Wind Waker, a darker story akin to Twilight Princess, and the stamina and character development of Skyward Sword? Fact of the matter is, Breath of the Wild has something for every kind of player. It offers deep and immersive gameplay for completionists and tough challenges for those who want to play as minimalistic as possible. It's hard to mention everything that makes Breath of the Wild not only a contender for best Zelda game, but one of the best video games ever made. With the lack of direction given to the player, it feels like the true evolution of Zelda 1 on the NES, where players can take the time to complete all the dungeons and take Ganon on heavily prepared, or they can just rush for Hyrule Castle and hopefully not get defeated by the terrifying Guardians. But the story is fleshed out to immerse the player to new sides of Zelda lore, where returning characters become more lovable and new characters fit right in. The combat is updated, the tools are simplified but perfected, and the world itself lets players go and do whatever they'd like, not only making this a great evolution of the Zelda series, but an experience that feels so perfectly balanced and crafted that it truly blew all expectation of Zelda out of the water. And that is what makes The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild unique. If you enjoyed this video, click that like button, and if you'd like to see more videos that discuss what makes any video game stand out, be sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching.